Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. Joining me once again is the Guns N' Roses to my Don't Step on the Roses, the Danny Zuko to my Oh Danny Boy, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we put ourselves through a difficult watch as we discuss 2000's definitely not a Scientology film, Battlefield Earth. So join us as we try not to vomit from the overuse of Dutch tilts, wonder what dirt John Travolta has on Forrest Whitaker, and above all else, whatever happens, do not mention the dreadlocks.
You could be forgiven for thinking you're listening to a Spaniard ordering a beer on the Costa del Sol. You could almost feel the sun beating down on his bullfighting cape. But what you were actually listening to was me, Sean Connery, displaying just one of the many accents that you too can master at the Sean Connery Dialect School for Actors. Now let me transport you to a Cold War era Russian submarine with flawless Russian dialect. This is my boat now, Captain Phillips. That was magic. You can learn this and many more at the Sean Connery Dialect School for Actors. Here endeth the lesson.
Battlefield Earth, where to begin? May 12th, 2000. It's an interesting film. That's probably the most generous way to put it. Had you seen this before watching it for this podcast?
You know what? I've never seen it, and I never even saw it on the TV, which you'd think it would be a film they'd always stick on the telly because someone got the rights for it cheap or something. But even then, I don't know if it was, you know, all those sort of late night sort of film 4 movies. I don't think I ever saw it on there or anything like that. But, you know, it feels like the movie somehow, to me, feels like, you know, when you're trying to explain a film to a friend, but you can't quite remember what film it is or something, or you kind of go, oh, what's that sci-fi movie where, you know, it's got that sort of alien guy in, there's that horse bit in there as well, and it's like, you get like 4 movies confused in your head, and it, you know what I mean? It feels like it feels like that, or like a memory, or a dream of a movie.
Well, I think it's quite clear that having watched this last night in preparation for this podcast, you've obviously said a few things that happen in the movie in your description, but at no point did I feel like I had a handle on what was actually going on in this movie. It felt like there was... At no point did they use a script. It felt like they were just going, shall we just do this now? Let's now do this. It's a very flawed film from the outset. As I say, you said you didn't see it on the TV growing up. If you'd listened to if any of our listeners have listened to the Starship Troopers episode, they will know that I happened to see this on Channel 5. I would have been probably 2001, 2002, but it was in the old TV guide as Starship Troopers. So I watched it thinking that it was Starship Troopers. Don't remember a lot of it coming out of it, other than it was just a pretty bad movie. The things that I do remember was I remember thinking, why is everything on a bit of an angle? Not really knowing anything about filmmaking at that point at a young age, and also, why does John Travolta have dreadlocks? Those were the 2 thoughts that I had that I can vividly remember having watched this film probably at the age of 10 or 11.
So, here's a question for you then, Ryan. You reckon you might have the answer. So, that's probably one of the first things you notice watching this movie is why is it filmed on the piss?
Yeah, I mean, obviously... since doing a little bit of filmmaking at university and at college, you learn that it's actually and we've mentioned it on several episodes before. It's something called a Dutch tilt or a Dutch angle, and it's often used in movies to create a sense of unease or a sense of something isn't quite right. It's often used like when you see, a main character suddenly gets to the point where they figure out that their best friend is the one who betrayed them, and there's sometimes a bit of a Dutch angle or a Dutch tilt. And when it's used like that and it's used sparingly, it's quite effective. I'm not quite sure if you choose to do, I would say, virtually every shot. I don't know if it has the same effect. If anything, it just makes you feel a little bit ill.
And is it Dutch tilt in either side?
It's not like, if you turn to the left, it's a Dutch tilt. If you turn to the right, that's called a Romanian tilt. No, it's just, it's on an angle. And as I say, everything feels just like uneasy and uneven.
Would the film have been better if it was filmed on the, the traditional untilt? What would you call it?
I don't think that would have had a massive effect on it. I think there's bigger problems at play here. I don't think it would have hurt to have had the traditional shot in there at all.
When they were filming it, you can just imagine the director going, guys, would at any point the actors been like, everyone's sort of leaning. Everyone's leaning, looking.
Yeah, everybody had one leg shorter than the other, so they're always doing it on heels. So
that explains it. They just filmed the whole film on a hill.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
unlike the majority of the film.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I will say before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, because I don't want it to be an entirely negative.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it. For me, I definitely had fun watching this, and I'm so glad I finally got to see it, because I've always it's never really been accessible on anything. I know it's notoriously bad, so I'd never have paid for it on a stream thing, so the fact that, we got it for this. Makes sense.
You probably wouldn't, let's say, buy 2 copies of the DVD in order to, record a podcast like somebody did. I think, as I say, I think it's one of those films where you kind of have to see it. You have to see it because it's almost a bit of like a, to say that you've done it, because obviously there's a lot of flaws with this film. I'm not saying it's an entirely 100% bad film. I think it is pretty bad. There are elements that I suppose you can take out of context and you can enjoy, or you can say, well, actually, all of that's pretty naff, or that's pretty bad, but actually that element's pretty alright or pretty okay. I think it's just about finding those things and not letting the rest of it kind of cloud your kind of judgment with it, because it is very easy to be, half an hour in, like I was, and going, what am I watching?
My main problem at the beginning is I was watching it quite late at night, and obviously wasn't blasting it out of the, so maybe I didn't give it the best chance, but I couldn't necessarily hear what they were saying for 10 minutes without having to turn it up. The sound is actually a bit, and I googled it, I was like, is this just the DVD, or is this my TV doing something odd with the audio? I didn't listen to it for sound or anything, which is probably not the best thing to do.
I don't think it would have made much of a difference.
But actually it has bad sound.
I think it's one of those things. I don't know if it's a conscious choice that some things have made. Obviously, notoriously, the film Tenet by Christopher Nolan. Now, I'm a huge Nolan fan, but notoriously that sound editing is quite bad, and it was a conscious choice. Whether or not in this film it's a conscious choice, it feels like it kind of has to be in places, because it's so weird in what it does. It's almost like there's points where they just abstract all of the sound out and just have weird, like almost like horror-esque noises, or water bells or things like that. It doesn't feel like a particularly, I don't know if, as I say, I don't like digging out the people who made the film, because I don't think anybody goes into a film to make a bad film, but looking at the crew in my research, and you kind of realise that actually a lot of the people who worked on it weren't necessarily what you would call experienced, good hand filmmakers. I'm not saying that they haven't gone on to do better things and they're not good in their own right, but it's not like, it's not like we've got Francis Ford Coppola directing, we've got, Tarantino's editor, we've got John Williams composer. It's not that kind of film. It's a film where it feels like a lot of it is kind of student film, or people who, he's only got the job because that person knows he's a bit of a yes man, or that person knows he can kind of manipulate him to do what he wants and he's not going to question it. Feels a little bit like that for me.
God, that feels kind of horrible though, doesn't it?
And kind of the more you look into this, the more you kind of realise, actually, I think that's probably what ended up happening here. You can't get past John Travolta in this movie, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that in the sense of he's the main character with some pretty atrocious acting. I mean, there's hamming it up, and then there's hamming it up.
Yeah, you wonder if you jammed that sort of villain in another movie, like if he was the villain in like this is mental to say, but Fifth Element. Like if he was that guy in that, I think maybe that film wouldn't have been totally. I mean, it's just everything that comes with this, and the fact that he's not really doing that much villainous stuff necessarily. He's more just like getting excited about them eating rats and stuff.
Yeah, he's just a bit of an oddball, isn't he? He's not like because
he's kind of a loser.
Yeah, like I remember, from memory, obviously seeing it a long time ago. My memory was that he was like this big. He was like the main leader of this alien race known as the Cyclos.
Yeah.
Which the first thing I pointed out in that little blurb at the start of the film was, the planet Cyclo. Nice original name. Take for that what you will. But I thought he was like the leader of them. He was like the strongest or the baddest or whatever it was. But he's just he's a cog in the machine, and not even a very good cog.
He's like a bad area manager or something, like just for some like small, some chain of shops. Like my experiences in Holland and Barrett.
Yeah, but he's the manager who basically texts you on your day off and say, we really need you in. We really need a team player today, and you go, oh, but I'm away on holiday. You approve my holiday, and they then text back saying, okay, you're going to really let the team down today. He's that sort of character, isn't he?
So I don't necessarily mind the Cyclos names or anything, because I think it's come from an old sci-fi book, and although I think L. Ron Hubbard's sci-fi isn't supposed to be that great, really, is the general consensus. It's hard for me to say because I've never read any of his ones, but so it's set 3,000 AD. They're under control of the alien Cyclos, and they've enslaved them for 1,000 years, apparently. Did you get that from this? Because
I mean, it kind of explains it in that opening blurb.
Oh, God, I forgot.
But having said that, if you didn't have that, i.e., let's say it's on the TV and you just missed the first 5 minutes of it, or the first whatever, because that's, that for years and years and years was how I watched films with my parents. I'd be, such and such is on at 8 o'clock. Oh, it's 8:03. Oh, it's all right. Spread it on. We'll catch up. There's a brilliant story going off on a bit of a tangent. When we first got Sky in our house, we had the Sky movies, and how it used to be is you'd have the movie channels. It wasn't like on demand like it is now. So if you wanted to watch, we want to watch this film, you had to, a bit like it is on just normal telly, you had to tune in at a certain time. So this one Saturday was the premiere. Every Saturday there was a new film that came out on Sky, and this week it was The Bourne Identity. And I remember going, oh yeah, that looks like a good film. My dad was looking forward to it, At that time we didn't really know what it was, but we thought it was going to be quite a good film. My mum puts it on, and we start watching it, and we're thinking, okay, we've missed the first 5 minutes of it. That's okay, no worries. And we're watching it, and me and my dad keep looking at each other, and we're going, what the hell is going on here? Got absolutely no understanding of what's going on here. And then about, I'd say, 3/4 of an hour later, it ends. And we're like, but that's only like a 50-minute film. What's going on? Turns out my mum had put it on Sky Movies Premiere +1.
Oh, classic.
We were going to watch it on +1, and she'd put it on the traditional one. So basically, we ended up watching half of the Bourne Identity.
Yeah.
So if you missed that first opening blurb, to kind of circle round back to my point, I don't know if you'd pick any of that up. You'd pick up that, humans are obviously the inferior race or whatever, but you wouldn't necessarily pick up any of this other stuff because it's all just a bit.
Doesn't necessarily look like they're even enslaving them, and they're all wearing, like the outfit choice for like the humans, and plus they're all like tribes people, but they're not tribes people. It seems just. I mean, the whole bits for the horses felt like straight from a fantasy movie, or like, do you know what I mean? It was the introduction to the movie felt like, God, it's really hard to put your finger on with this one, isn't it? But the beginning, when he sort of sets out on his horse or whatever, he just seems a bit like a character in, what are those puppet movies? The one that the guy that made Labyrinth, the puppet.
Oh yeah.
The
like
crystal skull,
never-ending story.
The crystal skull.
I know. Yes.
God, I'm thinking of isn't the crystal skull the Indiana Jones?
Yeah,
movie?
I know the thing you're thinking of. I just can't think what it's called.
I can see all the puppets. Anyway, those are great, aren't they? But it feels like that.
Yeah,
like his little home. Johnny, what's his name? Johnny Goodbye Tyler.
Which we don't actually find out until, I'd say, 3/4 of the way through the film.
Do you think he's good? I like him.
Barry Pepper is I think it's Barry Pepper is the actor. Yeah, Barry Pepper, which I think is quite a great name in and of itself, Barry Pepper. He's been in other... I think he's in The Green Mile. He usually plays supporting characters. I don't think he's too bad. I think he'd done the best he could have done with the script and the direction.
Yeah, I would say. And how about his... So he goes... What's funny about the notes is... says, Johnny Goodbye Taylor leaves his tribe in search of a better life. He is captured by the Cyclos and taken to a human mining camp. So that happens pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's all very, very much just like very quickly and not very... there's no like massive set piece or anything like that, is there? No,
there is a set piece. I would argue the falling through 3 panes of glass. He's run. So first of all, he meets the sort of the sidekick character who's he's in lots of stuff.
He calls him Greener because he says about the grass is greener.
Oh,
yeah.
and he sort of if you haven't been nothing up to necessarily this point of when he meets, what's his sidekick character?
So his sidekick character's name is Carlo. But again, I don't know if we actually hear him get referred to as Carlo.
So I was,
played by Kim Coates.
Up to this point, it was just normal movie, probably not going to be a great movie. And then he meets Carlo and he starts going, ooh, ooh, ooh.
It's
and
a bit
that really
weird,
throws you out of it.
It's very strange.
Because he's talking totally normally. And
then
he's
there's
doing
a little bit of a monkey ooh, ah, ah type thing.
And there's a bit as well around there where he's hitting like a big... It was like a stick. He's hitting those old,
basically, it's obviously like a theme park, isn't it? Like a mini golf place. That's what I mean. Like, anybody listening to us sort of talk about what happens in this film is going to get lost. But even if you were to watch the film, I don't think you'd be any the wiser. I think the first thing I kind of got from it, when you see them in the tribes and you see them in that world, it felt a little bit Planet of the Apes.
Okay, that's
in that kind of, okay, we're in a world where, in that obviously apes are king, or in here the cyclos are king, and you've got these small little tribes or small little, groupings of humans who are just trying to survive. I could kind of get on board there. That didn't jar too much with me, and there's you know, there's the character in there who's like the old wise man of the tribe. He's played by the same guy who's in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Okay. Oh yeah, of course.
And I think he's in Game of Thrones, well-known actor. And I was just thinking, it's not as if you've got a cast of all unknowns here. You know, like take it back to our last episode, Starship Troopers. If you've not listened to that, go listen to it. That had a relative cast of unknowns, and that managed to, obviously it had great direction. This has got a cast of people who are very, very well-renowned actors. Obviously, John Travolta. We've got Forrest Whitaker, Oscar-winning actor. You've got Barry Pepper, who is a great supporting actor. You know, you've got Kim Coates, who again is a good character actor, who's been in quite a few things where he's in Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah.
So it's not as if you've got people here who aren't able to pull a film together. It's not as if you've got, you know, absolutely nothing to work with. Obviously, I think that's kind of a testament to just kind of how bad the script was and how bad the kind of... I'm not going to say the direction, because I don't think it's the director's fault. I think it's the producer's fault, because it was produced by John Travolta as well. And it feels very much like you know, there's wider things at play on the sets of making this film. It wasn't just let's go and make this film.
Everyone's sticking their oar in or something.
I think it was very much like a Scientology based kind of thought process, because essentially it is a Scientology film. It's written by the same dude. The book it's based on is written by L. Ron Hubbard, who's the guy who started or wrote the books that Scientology is based on. Obviously, John Travolta is one of the highest profile Scientologists, probably next to Tom Cruise is probably the biggest one. But up until Tom Cruise came around, it was John Travolta.
Where I start to realise it was going wrong, I guess, is that bit where it is just he makes the ooh. Is that Kim Coates?
Yeah, it's Kim Coates.
So that be like, I wasn't ready for that yet. And then probably to the point we could have cut that bit. They could have just cut that bit out and then just did some of the talking a bit. You know, just cut it and then just go, because there's some other weird cuts in this. That wouldn't be like the worst. That wouldn't be the worst cut if it just cut halfway through a sentence. In this movie, wouldn't have mattered. So I would, why don't you just do that? And then, but then they're getting chased by the cyclos, and they obviously get captured. But that you start to realise, the guns are rubbish. And they shoot out the bottom because that's the stun feature, and then the top bit has like a lethal.
I think
feature.
I think that's how they
hardly
work.
Aim them, and they're running through it. There's a bit where one of the tribes people trying to not get captured, he just jumps from a big height and just hurts himself. Did you see that?
Yeah,
he just jumps from, like, they're in a car park or something. They're all running away. Our main character runs a lot for the first third of the movie. Actually, he tries to escape a couple of times, and one of these tribal characters jumps from a sort of a couple of stories or something, trying to escape, and he just hurts himself. He just jumps. He goes, whoa! And it's like, well, of course you're gonna and then there's the scene where they capture some of them, but then they shoot our main guy Johnny Goodbye Tyler, and he slow motion falls through 3 or 4 upright panes of glass, and it goes on for ages.
And it's actually one of the first instances of slow motion in the film, which is used an awful lot.
Yeah.
One of the things I put, and it kind of goes back to pretty much everything they do in this film, a little bit like what I was saying with the Dutch angles and the Dutch tilts. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, it kind of loses all of its meaning and loses all of its power. So when he first gets captured, as you say, it does that kind of weird slow motion thing, which arguably whether or not that works in that particular scene, I don't think it does, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt and let's say, okay, it works in that scene. When we then see slow motion in virtually every other action sequence throughout the whole film. It's very much, okay, we're doing slow motion again, are we? Oh, okay, we're doing it again, are we?
Did you watch that new movie on... I haven't watched it because it got such bad reviews, but the Netflix one made by...
Zack Snyder,
yeah, that apparently that overuses
I know the one you're
motion,
thinking of.
So he loves a bit of slow-mo, doesn't he? Did you watch that?
I haven't seen that, no. And I think that's part of one of the many problems is that it doesn't know when to say we've already done that, we need to do something different, or let's not do that again. And so it just kind of just repeats itself on a kind of never-ending loop of, like, you mentioned the sound earlier. In that scene where he first gets captured, there's a really weird thing where it just kind of just takes out all of the sound to a point where you think, as you say, like your TV's like, you know, you've blown a speaker or you've pushed a mute button or something. It doesn't feel natural. And then it does it again later on in a very similar kind of scene. It does the same thing. And it's not like, again, we're not, you know, we're not sitting here going, okay, well, what meaning can we apply that to as audience members? Which basically means that it hasn't worked for us.
Well, actually, that was something that went through when I was watching this. I was like, oh, these guns must be like sound wave blasters. You know, a bit similar to the old Dune movie. The voice activated sound guns, which weren't from the books or anything apparently, but which I used to think was, but yeah, it made me think that these guns are shooting sound waves at them or something. But I don't think that's actually what it's trying to say, unless that's something they've taken from the book. I think it's just bad. I think that's just bad decision.
I think that's
means
kind
nothing.
of, as I say, that's kind of you probably giving the film the benefit of the doubt and trying to kind of go, okay, well, let's not let that ruin it for me. Let's not just immediately presume that it's done it because it's, you know, they don't know what they're doing, or it's not very... Do you know what I mean? And I think, obviously, you kind of have to have that mindset with this film to kind of get any enjoyment out of it. You have to kind of really be able to be objective with it and go, okay, well, I know I'm not enjoying a lot of this movie, but what do I enjoy?
I enjoyed whatever was going on between... I feel like we come on to...
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, John Travolta. I can't think of John Travolta. That's so bad. Whatever was going on between those two you know, John Travolta.
Yeah, that
Forrest
subplot
Whitaker
is
that was a joy
there's
to
some
watch.
humour there, but I don't. Again, I like to think they were playing that for humour, but I don't know if they were. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm finding it quite funny because it's so kind of over the top and outlandish. But I don't know if that was their intention. I don't know if John Travolta was sitting there going, this is a serious thing. We're not playing this for laughs right now. Do you know what I mean? I'm not confident that he knows what he's doing.
But for me to enjoy that, I don't think he has to be in on it.
True.
Admittedly. For me, it's just, that is kind of, I don't know. It's almost like, it's watching those two on screen together is like watching like, it just feels, it's not relatable for me, but there's just something about them. It's like a couple of guys that work together that really don't want to, that just don't like each other.
It feels a little bit like, it's going to be a slight stretch, but do you remember the old Power Rangers TV show?
Yeah.
I can't remember what, there was obviously you had the Power Rangers, but you had the two doofus kids, I can't remember their names, the characters, but those guys who were friends, but you could see there was a bit of a hierarchy between them, and it was always played for laughs, and they were like the, oh, look at these two doofuses type thing.
And I think for me as well, it feels like that. I don't know if Forrest Whitaker and John Travolta are mates or whatever, but what I think I'm trying to get at is it felt like, not that I bought into that, because I just said what they are. They're just two people at work, don't get on, that is kind of what they are. But it feels like it ran deeper into behind the scenes of like, it feels like it runs like parallel with what was actually happening in that room. Like maybe Forrest Whitaker going, what am I doing in there? Well, and then John Travolta going, Yeah, come on, Forrest, just ham this up with me. Oh, the ceiling. Oh,
Forrest, I don't think you're quite matching my my energy and my
feels like there's
enthusiasm
a few
here.
layers to that. Like what you're seeing on screen is what's happening behind the scenes.
Well, I kind of alluded to it in the intro, because I reckon John Travolta must have some sort of dirt on Forrest Whitaker here. He must have, because Forrest Whitaker is a very, very good actor. I don't think, other than this, I don't think I've seen a film with Forrest Whitaker in where he or the film has been bad. And here, it's like, it feels very much like if you don't star in this film with me, this goes to the press type thing. I know that sounds ridiculous and it's probably completely made up. Well, it is made up.
I just think, who doesn't want to be in a massive sci-fi romp with John Travolta, having this part in it? I reckon you're going to get to the cast later, isn't it? But John Travolta was supposed to play the main character, I think, not the villain. Do you know that? He was supposed to be, which is kind of crazy itself, because I can't quite imagine.
He kind of aged out of the role by the time they...
Yeah, do you reckon he's like, I've always wanted to do Battle for Death, and obviously I see myself, John Travolta, as Johnny, goodbye, John Travolta. Yeah. And then, he's got to the point where he then turned into being, Turl, the chief of security for the Cyclos on Earth. It feels like he's such a, not bureaucratic, but he's not impressive in any way, really.
He's what we would call in this country as a real job's worth.
Yeah.
He's the sort of person who takes his job a little bit too seriously. Basically, he's a glorified traffic warden. So nothing against traffic wardens, but sometimes you get those traffic wardens who's like, well, actually, I think you're fine. By the law, you should actually be parked in this angle here. Yeah. He feels like that sort of character.
Yeah.
But he just has a little bit more motivation to kind of get the gold.
And he seems to have more empathy. Like, considering he's from a race of cyclos or whatever, he seems to be quite either very dumb or quite empathetic to Johnny Goodbye. Because there has a lot of times where he could have... It's very Dr. Evil, isn't he? He could have at any point... He could have at any point just killed him, and then he sort of makes him... He sort of wants to make him his his prodigal son.
I think he kind of realises he's a tool, isn't he? He is tool. Which is such a weird thing, like, in this hot... So the main thing that they mine, the cyclos, on Earth, the thing that is the most valuable to them is gold, which feels like such a weird thing for an alien race to want is gold, because it's what humans essentially want. Gold is valuable.
And he thinks that we're taking it personally. He thinks that we're like... No, he thinks that the human... Like, he calls them, like... Does he call them animal dogs? No.
Man animals.
Man animals. Why do I think dogs?
There is a conversation in there about dogs.
So he calls them man animals, yet he's...
Again, a great name, in inverted commas.
Is it trying to... Is there a deeper theme that, they're just like us and they think that... like how we were talking about Starship Troopers, the tone was very different. Talking about Starship Troopers, I felt like I wasn't qualified to talk about it, because I felt like there's quite a lot of deep themes in there. And this, if we're trying to go, to the deep themes, what is this saying? Because he thinks that we're just totally... like animals, and they can do what they want with us, they can enslave us or whatever, but he is going to the bar drinking a Star Wars looking juice and getting drunk with his mates, and sort of has the same sort of middle management qualms that we all have as humans. They're just like us, but they think they're so separate.
I think those themes are definitely there.
Yeah.
I just think they're not there. I don't think anybody making the film was, and this is going to sound really harsh, I don't think anybody was intelligent enough to explore that in a way that was interesting.
Yeah.
I think it was done very much in a... I don't even think people making this film were thinking like that, other than perhaps John Travolta.
Do you think they were just going to say, let's just honour the source material? Let's just...
I think that's exactly probably what John Travolta...
make this.
Because this is John Travolta wanting this to be made. Nobody, other than perhaps other Scientologists, I don't think anybody who had read that novel by L. Ron Hubbard went, this needs to be made into a film. I don't think that's what was happening. I think what happened is it's a Scientology film, essentially. It's almost a piece of propaganda in its way of going, look at all of this huge lore. It's like Star Wars. It's like Lord of the Rings. It has all this big kind of like history and lore in this world that we live in what is Battlefield Earth. But nobody was kind of astute enough to actually explore that in a way that meant the viewers were interested in it. It was done very much like, for example, the point I was making with the gold is that's something really easy for humans to be able to identify with, because gold is a valuable thing. So immediately we're not necessarily looking at the alien race as alien. We're looking at them as slightly weird looking humans. There's nothing there like where we go, okay, that's an interesting kind of, okay, well, maybe alien races who were coming to this Earth, maybe that is what they'd be looking for, or that's what they would be interested in, because it's not something they have on there. Do you know what I mean? It just, at no point does it kind of feel like...
Part of me wonders if then they did invade, like, would they have... But I just think they probably would have lost, because they're quite incompetent.
They do seem quite incompetent, don't they?
So one of the first signs of... Well, it's not one of the first. There's probably a few. No, actually, I think so. But... So... I think he tries to run away a couple of times for... I can't remember. But the bit that is very sort of reminiscent of Flash Gordon for me is when he John Travolta, 7 foot tall version, and
clearly wearing stilts.
He says, this character is he's I can't quite remember the reason why he puts Johnny in front of the the learning sort of machine. It's like a punishment.
That's because he wants to teach humans to mine for gold so that they don't have to pay them.
And what he does by putting him in front of this sort of brain zap machine, it shoots this sort of energy into his head, and it is the Flash Gordon bit where in Flash Gordon they use it to try and dumb the human down to make him compliant, but in this movie
it's to actually get him to essentially unlock all of the workings of the human mind.
Yeah, and then he understands full-on maths and chemistry. He goes back to his prison, and also the room is open for anyone. All the prisoners try and come in and go, stop. They try and stop it from happening, and then he goes, no, let's carry on. But they could all just become super clever if they want to in that moment.
Yeah, it doesn't. And also, he becomes super clever, but only in certain ways. So, for example, when they're making their way to Fort Knox to get all the gold, which is a whole subplot in and of itself. Like, let's go to Fort Knox to get all the gold.
It's only behind one heavy door.
Yeah, so. A great fort that is, isn't it? They're obviously following the map, and Johnny says to the people who are reading the map, we have gone over there, but we haven't. The line must be faded, because he's obviously looking at a map where there's clear lines on like different states and stuff. But he hasn't got the understanding to know that that's not actually like an actual line on Earth. It's just on a map, and that's what I mean about like it's like the left hand isn't talking to the right hand. So on one hand, he's got all of this knowledge, but he also doesn't understand how maps work in a very, very basic way. And it just seems like a collection of scenes with no kind of thread going in between them.
You could imagine the concept art for this movie looking really good, actually. Like Johnny, Johnny getting shot by the brain machine, the sort of sound wave looking type guns, the Harriers and the tribespeople in the Harrier jump jets, whatever. I reckon on in art or in a comic, this could look really cool.
And I think, you know, just to, you know, tie us back to the kind of, you know, the figures and the budget. I think that's probably, other than John Travolta's fee to star and produce this movie, I think there's, you know, a good portion of the budget is going on those kind of set designs, costume designs, and all of those kinds of things. Because, again, having an objective head, there's some elements of that I quite like. You know, the ships that the cyclos use, I think that's quite a nice design for a ship. It looks pretty cool. In complete isolation, that's an enjoyable part.
The guns look like needlers or the more normal one from Halo.
Yeah,
actually.
I know exactly the one you mean. So, as I say, mentioning the budget. So this was made on a rather substantial budget of $73 million, which is about £57 million at the time, adjusted for inflation, $133 million. In its opening weekend, it made $11 million back, which isn't. I'm not going to say that's a bad going. It's probably not what they were wanting, but I'm not going to. I think it's better than it certainly could have been. Domestically, it only made 21 million, and worldwide, it only made 29 million. So a big loss there, big flop at the box office, which doesn't always mean it's a bad film. Sometimes, like Shawshank Redemption is notorious. That was a bit of a flop at the box office, but is widely regarded as one of the best films ever made. This isn't that. I think this is word of mouth. I think a lot of it. People going, oh, should we go and see? Because on the face of it, as you say, it does look quite cool. It has that Starship Troopers-esque, that kind of Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5, that kind of, that viewpoint and that kind of, you know, Farscape and all of those kinds of things. Stargate. It's very similar, you know, from the outside looking in. So, you know, a trailer could probably make this film look interesting enough to make you want to go and see it in the cinema. Or at least if you've a bunch of friends, you go and see that film, you probably go, yeah, go on then. I think where it stumbles is after viewing it, people are coming out and going, what have I just watched? Don't go and watch that, it's terrible. And I think that's inevitably what's ended up happening here. Because as I say, it's got stars in there. You know, I think it's good. I think it's important to remember in context, you know, John Travolta's career, because obviously he started his career with things like Saturday Night Fever and Grease and, you know, Blowout and those films, and they kind of pushed him right into the forefront of Hollywood. The 80s, he kind of, you know, meandered out, and his career was pretty much, I'm not going to say dead, but he wasn't a big star. And Pulp Fiction came out with by Tarantino, and that kind of had a resurgence of John Travolta. And the mid-90s is basically Travolta's heyday. You think about the films that he was in the mid-90s, when you've got things like Pulp Fiction, you've got Face Off, you've got Broken Arrow, you've got all of these films where, you know, John Travolta is a big star. May 12th, 2000 comes around, and I still don't think John Travolta's career has kind of recovered from it. I'm not saying he hasn't been in good stuff since. He was very, very good in American Crime Story, based on the O.J. Simpson trial. Was good in that. But John Travolta isn't John Travolta of 99.
He's kind of the Scientology. Everyone knows him as the Scientology guy. Really.
And this film obviously feeds into that and doesn't help.
Yeah,
you know, obviously,
might be the reason.
And that's the thing. Tom Cruise is also very much the Scientology guy, but you can forget it because his films, generally speaking, are enjoyable and are really good.
I was just thinking, maybe we need to say why more. You know, I feel like if anyone listening, if hasn't seen this film, like what separates this from like a Starship Troopers or something? And obviously there's all the obvious things like, you know, maybe acting, maybe the whole film not filmed on the piss and a Dutch angle. bad sound design and stuff like that. We listened to the music a bit earlier. The music's pretty good.
The music feels very like American Civil War type music. Like you can hear it like over the Gettysburg Address.
Yeah, it's cool.
That kind of music. And
to me, this movie feels like a sequel. You know, like it feels like if someone was to say this is I don't know, what's the film that's most? This is Mad Max number 21, or like, you know, like if a franchise that started off pretty good went on and made like 21 movies, this is like 22.
This is the straight to DVD release. Yeah, that has a bit of a cult following potentially.
But it's not. It's the first.
It's not a good introduction into this world, is it? And
no.
You know, world building isn't here. It doesn't. You know, and
no, it's not at all actually.
And you know, this film felt every single second of an hour and 54 minutes thereabouts. And this is going to sound really strange because it's obviously quite a long, difficult watch. I think if you add on another 10, maybe 20 minutes and kind of flesh out some of those motivations and just have a bit more of a thread and a little bit more of a, you know, a reasoning behind why things happen or how things happen, I think it becomes I'm not going to say a good movie, but it becomes a better movie. Because there are so many instances here where you kind of go, well, how did that happen? How have they managed this? What has led to this point?
I don't think it needs more time. I think they could have cut out the whole bit where at one point, sort of, I think, is it before he becomes, I don't know if it's before he learns their language and stuff, but they send him on they want to find out what his favourite food is.
Yeah. So they send him out.
They send him up a mountain with a couple of the main characters, and they're watching him on like they always have really bad cameras in this. Like, that's one of the sort of silly things about the movie, which I don't mind stuff like that because it's sort of a bit campy. They always the doorbell. So I just carry on.
Yeah.
So yeah, they follow him around with these stupid sort of cameras that always make everything in these movies kind of. It's sort of a cheat way of saying how they can see everything that's going on, really. Yeah. But I think in this one are they like buttons on their outfit?
Yeah, I think So
they have these secret cameras, and they're trying to find out what his favourite food is, so they can get him to do stuff. I think, and then. Because they're so hungry, even they don't get the sense that they're starving or anything, but it's been a few days, and the first thing that he goes to do, and bearing in mind the characters aren't that tribal in this, and if they were tribal, I actually think it's kind of bad. Like, not it's not that bad, but it's like, you know, I don't think if I was writing a tribal character that, you know, because they look like they live quite a nice life out in the sticks, basically. You know, they got horses and stuff like that. But the first thing he goes to do is he runs to a rat, and then he grabs a rat, and then he just bites into a raw rat. And it's like, these people would know how to make fire.
There's definitely a fire in Johnny's tribe back at the start of the film.
So the fact that, and then they all share the rat as well. Like and then that makes Turl think that his favourite food is rat, and I don't know if this is. It feels like it feels like a joke, this bit, but I don't. What the fuck?
Everything's a bit of a leap, isn't it? Like it's a bit of a leap for it to be believable in every kind of sense. So as you said, yes, they obviously would have the ability to start a fire, which when we get onto it, when in the third act, when we see what those same tribes people end up doing in this final battle, they would absolutely have the ability to start a fire if they can fly a jet. And it's And that's what I mean. Like, there's no, okay, well, how did they get from that point to this point? All of that in the middle stuff isn't there in here. It's just, okay, well, 1 minute he's this, 1 minute he's that. And I think the only character who kind of does have that a little bit is Johnny, what's his name?
Johnny Goodbye. Oh my
Johnny
God.
Goodboy Tyler.
I've been saying goodbye.
Wow.
So,
maybe that's just what you would like to say to him. Goodbye. See you later.
Yeah, I've been saying Johnny Goodbye Tyler. So it's Johnny Goodboy Tyler.
Johnny
okay.
Goodboy Tyler. Which is a bit, again, where's the good boy come from?
So once they've I don't know, Ryan, I don't have a clue. Once they've he can then he because of the brainwash machine or what's the opposite of a brainwashing machine, a dirty brain machine, I think. So he can now speak their language. The whole way they did language in this movie.
It's really bad, because up to that point we're not questioning the fact that they're speaking in different languages, because we obviously understand the words that are being said. There isn't like a scene where they say, "Oh, the cyclos use this language decryption thing that means they can understand the humans and that humans can understand." We just take it that, we suspend our disbelief that they're speaking the same language. And it's only when we see that he has to learn the Cyclos' language that we then go, oh, they couldn't understand each other.
I kind of got that from it, though, because in the scenes where they're talking, and some of them, like, he goes, blah, 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 blah. It's sort of, I think it does come across a bit that they're speaking Cyclo and they're speaking English, and then when they're together it does this. I've seen it used somewhere before where they use that same idea as they're both speaking the same language on when you see them separately for the audience, but when they get together it's that they can't fully understand each other. Yeah. So I kind of got that language thing from it, I think. But now he Turl's plan is that he wants them to mine gold because they love gold, basically. I think, and this is probably the stupidest part of all for me, was the gold bars.
Yeah.
So Johnny Goodboy Taylor's Johnny the Good Boy Tyler's plan is that they go. What is it that he said we won't mind the gold. They know.
So from him reading in the library,
so many stupid things. Because why does he take him to the library? He takes him to the library on the leash and goes, "Do you want to know about your history?
It's all here.
It's all here." Yeah. And then he's
and so he in learning about his history, he learns about Fort Knox, which is where obviously America keeps a lot of its gold, if not all of it. And so when they're taken to mine for gold, the plan is to go from Denver to where Fort Knox is, which is in Kentucky. And I don't know geography of America that well, but either way, it's quite a distance because it's from one state to the other. And they just go there, and they use the ship that they're. It's, again, just nothing's really ever really explained.
And the fact that they can't mine for that gold on that creek anyway, the cyclos, because they'd probably do it themselves, right? But they can't do it because of the radioactivity, I think. They go, oh, we have to stop here and you have to go there. But it's just like, if it's that radiated, how radiated is it? Because then they'd all get like radiation sickness and stuff. Yeah,
it would be on the gold bars. It would be kind of everywhere. And also, what kind of a system is, we can only go this far, but you people who we are enslaving, who we don't want you to run away, you go off there and get the thing that we need. We trust you to come back.
Well, what's funny, isn't it? A joke. Like, it's like, I can't. if someone locks up something, like, you can't get into the garage one day. Isn't it a bit of a saying to be like, oh, it's like bloody Fort Knox, this?
Yeah.
And but I guess he did all that reading. He found out where the gold was.
But he's not going to find a book on how to get into Fort Knox without a key.
I swear it's just one door that they knocked down.
It's just...
And then, what I actually like about the film is that when he delivers the gold to Tell goes, why is it doesn't he? He's like,
why is it in bars?
Yeah, why is it in bars? Yeah.
He's like, we thought it would be better for you rather than in its raw form or whatever. And he's like, huh.
No, doesn't he go? Because the audio of this movie's bad, I didn't rewind it, but I swear he might say something like, John Travolta.
He tests it and then he says,
as you've wasted
as
time.
you've had enough time to smelt it into bars, you now only have 7 days to get me the rest of the gold. Can you do that in the
impression of John Travolta in this movie, though? Because I feel like it's hard to see why this is so silly. Actually, it's not.
As you've had time to smelt it into bars, you only have 7 days to bring me the rest of my gold. Just the whole... I mean, his performance is like... Again, I don't think anybody had the balls to say to John Travolta, it's a bit too far. Like, it feels very much like a kid's villain in a kids' TV show, where it is like that.
I think you had it right with Power Rangers. It feels like the Power Rangers villains.
Hello and welcome back to Deal or No Deal, where before the break, Gary is hoping to find a low number in box number 6. Now, Chris, can you do the honours? We really want to see a blue.
Good luck, Gary. I hope it's a low number for you.
since Mr. Blobby. Blobby.
But let's get on to the crew who made the film, and let's explore potentially where there may have been some pitfalls. So it was directed by Roger Christian, who kind of his most notable work up to that point was on Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope as a set director. So his kind of experience is more in kind of like the art department. He'd worked on Nostradamus and The Sender as well, and was the second unit director on Phantom Menace. So he had some experience in working on big budget films, obviously, but maybe not being the helm of those films. I think he actually got the job at the suggestion of John Travolta. So if the script was written by Corey Mandel, and his only other credit was a TV movie called Love Kills in 1991.
So I've actually watched an interview of him. Do you want to know my knowledge of Corey
have a little
Mandel?
bit of-
Because it's quite interesting. So he went on after this because obviously he had this credited in his name.
Yeah.
So he said, this was a big deal for him. So
Well, to be fair, it would be, wouldn't it? You're working on a big budget picture with John Travolta.
yeah, and he went after this. What he does now, I think, or since, was he went into it didn't ruin his career. He went into other stuff, but he went into teaching. But it's actually a really cool life lesson. What this guy says is he basically had they're interested. They got him to do it because he had like three or four projects that he'd wrote the scripts for, and they were gonna go get out there, put into big budget movies, and then all of them fell through. I don't necessarily think that was just because of the script. I think that's Hollywood, baby. It's one of those things, because he said, I thought it was just me. He said, I think God hates me or something. All my scripts just keep not getting off the ground, or there's always something goes wrong. And then he started talking to other writers, and they had 3 or 4 that didn't work. He's like, oh, okay, it's just this. And I think he did something relatively good. Maybe it was Love Kills before.
1991 was Love Kills.
Yeah, so and he had this interview. He had a meeting with an agent apparently, and the agent said, "Right, Corey, whatever you do next, this is going to be what defines you as an artist." They said, "Don't just take anything that comes your way. Make sure you take something that you only want to do. Don't let money sway you or anything like that." And he said he got goosebumps from this conversation. But as time went on, he was contacted by these guys, and it's not that he sold out, but he said, more money was offered. He said, I don't know, and then he said, it will. Why he took it as well. He said a lot of the things that don't go off the ground never have a big name actor on it. He said this will get made because it's got John Travolta in it. It's gonna get made. So it's kind of this is my movie, and he wasn't really behind it. So he did it, and then I think he doesn't take full responsibility for the movie. I think he kind of does, but what happened is he did a script, then the script got changed loads by all of the whatever was going on in this movie, all the producers and stuff. So who knows what his movie might have looked like, but the lesson he learned is that, and what he kind of preaches about in a way is, he said, if you give in to the system, and if you give in to Hollywood and let it do what it wants to do, he said you'll get a battlefield Earth. He said you have to keep your self-respect really, and your and so it's kind of interesting, isn't it? That he sort of sees this as a bit of a life lesson for him, because he said this is the most humiliating thing that could have possibly happened for him being a writer, because it's his name credited on this potentially the worst movie. And
I think as well, to give him the benefit of the doubt, there's only so long that you can hold on and have that kind of, I'm not completely 100% behind this project, so I'm not gonna. You're offering me this amount of money, but I don't believe in the project, so I'm not going to, if you're struggling to pay the bills and your main source of income is being a writer, there's only so many times you can say, well, that amount of money, I'm going to pass that down because I don't believe in the project. As I say, it sounds like here he got given, offers, an offer where it was too good to refuse, Marlon Brando style. And you've kind of got to, I don't begrudge him for that, because, if you are a writer in Hollywood and you're not getting any work, and, you've turned down the last 4 projects you've been offered because you don't believe in the project, suddenly at some point you kind of do have to go, well,
I'll just do one.
I've got to take something, haven't I?
Yeah.
Otherwise I'm no longer a writer, I'm somebody who has written. And it's that kind of thing. And I think as well, not to say he's a bad writer, because I think a lot of sometimes writing is having the right person read it. So there's a great story with Tim Burton, who when he done the first sort of like script for Edward Scissorhands, he sent it to Gary Oldman because he wanted Gary Oldman to star in it. And Gary Oldman read it and was like, I don't get it. I don't get any of this. What is this about? There's a house at the end of this street and it's he just didn't get it at all. And Gary Oldman went, it's not for me. It's not my kind of thing. And then it came out, and within seconds of seeing that opening shot in Edward Scissorhands, he went, I get it. And I think sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes it's just having the right person read it and the right person go, oh, I see what this person's doing. So, you can't really begrudge, the writer for
and
that.
And
for
we
that.
don't know how much it had changed. It might be like they might have.
The more you look into this, the more you realise there was, a lot of John Travolta doing what he wanted to do, I think.
As well, like how sci-fi is looking at the future. Like this film is like a bit of a glib look at what a future could be like if aliens came down and enslaved us for 1,000 years. But actually, I think this film is a good look at what happens to what is happening to our movies now, to be honest, because I feel like these movies made by committees and corporate, like movies made by people that don't necessarily want to just make a, like the writer's intention was probably relatively good, but obviously he sort of took it for a bit of a cash thing. But I don't think that would have made just a terrible movie. It was all the other stuff and all the probably changes that happened to this during making it, and the producer maybe having a bit of an agenda for it and stuff. I feel like this with the plot holes in this, there's quite a few plot holes. There's more plot holes in the latest Star Wars movie, there's more plot holes. I don't even know what it's called.
I think it's The Last Jedi, isn't it?
And that Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of the Skywalker.
There's probably more plot holes in that than this. And I think that's because more people have been involved and messing with it and stuff. So, this might have been the worst movie made then, but I don't think it is now, because I think this movie is still sort of a fun, silly, stupid watch. It kind of annoying.
Yeah, if you take it in that regard, I think you can have an enjoyable time with it. I think part of the problem is that I don't think it was intended like that. Yeah. I think it's intended to be not an ultra serious thing, but it's intended to be a credible piece of art in that regard. You know what I mean? Like, when sometimes somebody gets so kind of like, it's the age-old thing when you say somebody's creating like, a song, and after, they've been spending 6 months on this song, they no longer hear it. And then they have to show it to somebody else because they go, oh, well, I don't like this bit because I can hear this. And actually they go, it's not there. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's almost like this. It's like people were so kind of mixed up in, all this source material and whatever. They've kind of forgot they were making a movie that people wanted to go and see.
Yeah.
They were too busy I think John Travolta was too busy trying to be faithful to this book and couldn't really see the flaws in the book potentially, because apparently the book's
that's interesting, because nowadays people have problem when it doesn't honour the source material. But I guess the difference is
I think it depends on the source material, doesn't it?
Yeah, that is the problem with this, is like maybe Starship Troopers did a good thing by putting its own spin on it in a way, because it kind of separates the book from this. So maybe this could have done good if
it's the thing of like, if you're basing your film on something, you either have to be as close to that source material as possible, or you have to do something different without forgetting where you came from.
Yeah.
I think the instances where films that are based on stuff where they don't seem to... So, for example, there's a new version of The Crow coming out. I love the 1994 version. I think it's a fantastic film. Literally the only remnants of that film that is in the remake seems to be the general gist of the narrative and the fact it's called The Crow, and that's it. And it's like, okay, well, now I can just see you're creating that film just to cash in on the name. You're not creating it because you feel like there's more of a story there to tell, or you feel like there's a market or an audience who want to see a remake of The Crow. You're just doing it to make money. And I think here, it's kind of... I think that was kind of the opposite problem. I think John Travolta was so hell-bent on creating a film based on this book, he kind of forgot that it needs to make money and people need to enjoy it. It's like, you know, as I say, I said it earlier on in the podcast, I don't think anybody read that L. Ron Hubbard book and went, that needs to be made into a film. I want to see that in a film. So, you know, as I say, John Travolta produced it, but he also was helped by Jonathan D. Crane, who had also worked on a lot of John Travolta's other films, like Look Who's Talking, Look Who's Talking 2, Face Off, Look Who's Talking Now. Also produced as well with Ellie Samara, who'd worked on The Boondock Saints.
I don't know what that is.
So that's a bit of a cult classic now. I think it's about... I apologise for any Boondock Saints fans listening, but I think that's basically about like these two brothers who are religious. I think they either die or they get a message from God to basically go and sort of like, you know, hunt down like bad people, essentially. That's a really bad way of explaining it, but essentially that's it. It's got William Dafoe. It's got, what's his name, who is in, I can't think of his name, Norman Reedus.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Again, bit of a cult classic. Art of War she worked on as well with Wesley Snipes. The composer was Elia Kimrell, who worked on Ronin, Resident Evil Apocalypse, Splinter. Cinematographer, so Giles Nutchins. So this is the person who decided or was told, do everything on a bit of on the piss, mate. So he'd worked on Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones. He'd worked on the whole prequel trilogy.
Maybe.
So he's not... And this
but maybe that the prequels aren't necessarily known for their... I look on the prequels super favourably now because I think we've seen what... Because I grew up watching those ones, so I love those ones.
It's a product of your time. Yeah.
But they're not necessarily known for being like the greatest movies.
But in terms of like the cinematography and how they're shot, there's some great set pieces in there.
Oh yeah, they
are. And they're shot, from what I can remember, you know, maybe not phenomenally, but they're shot well. So again, how much of this is just director saying, no, this is what I want, or John Travolta saying, this is what I want, and then edited, which again, the editing in this film, we always say, or Jim used to always say, you never really notice a good editor, but you notice a bad editor. And I think the editing in this film, one of the things that is most sort of out of place is the transition shots.
The centre wipes, you know, like when it... So
it's Windows Movie Maker at its most basic.
You know, those wipes are used in the old Star Wars really well.
Yes.
Because, you know, like, what happens in this, I was thinking about this, is like, a scene doesn't really have a good resolution, and then it wipes. You know, there's that scene where, that is the scene, he bumps his head, towards the beginning, Turl bumps his head on the ceiling, and then Forrest Whitaker like walks away going, oh yeah, or something, and then it does it sort of this, you know, I don't know it's a wipe, but it opens up from the centre of the screen, and it's like, because that scene, I don't quite know what the sort of psychological or why that messes with your head so much, but it really feels so out of place that it's doing this sort of Star Wars wipe after someone has bumped their head and then Forrest Whitaker has walked off. You know, like in Star Wars, it might do a wipe after the Slave One takes off from... It
happens in a natural place.
Yeah.
A natural place for you to progress to the next scene, not just halfway through a sentence or halfway through a scene or... and that's what I mean. It's
so
like,
bad.
It's like everything. You know how like if you're editing a piece of music, or you're editing, anybody who does any editing will know what I'm talking about here. Or you're editing a little bit of footage, and on the system that I use, if you delete a section, it will then say move entire timeline, or just that singular bit, or fill the gap, and it feels like he's filled the gap, and so everything is like 3 seconds too early.
Yeah.
So like everything kind of happens in an unnatural place, and again, probably how much of it was, were they working against deadlines and so they didn't have time to go back and make it a bit more natural, or maybe the footage wasn't there. I don't know, but it just feels very much...
But instead of those wipes in this, it could have just been better if it just changed scene.
Absolutely,
100%.
They're
just, it's almost like...
It's a very clear choice, isn't it, to have centre wipes.
But that's got nothing to do with Scientology, or surely John Travolta's not deciding no centre.
It doesn't, but...
Do you know what I mean? So why is that like that in this?
I think it's because... there isn't a... I think it's because there isn't a clear vision of something. So, like, if I was making a film and I didn't have the studio interference, let's say I was directing a film and I'd written a film, and I would want to be involved in every single part and go, okay, well, I want it edited like that. And even if I couldn't do it myself, I'd have somebody who could achieve that for me. And I think here, the director isn't really the director. They're kind of there just to be the person who's behind the camera when John Travolta's there. I think John Travolta isn't skilled enough filmmaker to know what he's doing. Just because you're on the other side of the camera, you're pretty good, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good on the other side of the camera. And I think there's an element of going, well, I'm not being given any direction here by the director, so I'll edit it how I want to edit it. So it could have been I'll do that because I think it looks cool.
I mean, it might just be, let's just use the George Lucas ones. You know what I mean? So I'll start, that's a sci-fi, just sort of, it's just sci-fi fantasy. I guess maybe that's what they were doing, just use those ones.
Yeah, and not really realising how they were used.
I hope it was someone in the edit room, just like in the cutting room, being
this will show them.
Being a bit like, the character from Fight Club. Like the guy that just puts the
bit of porn in.
Yeah, when people are at the cinema. Yeah, like, he's thinking, this is stupid. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to do a Star Wars. He asked for Star Wars edits. I'm going to do a Star Wars fade just after.
I'll show you.
Just after Tell bumps his head and Forrest Whitaker walks off. That's where I'm going to stick it. They wanted it after the ships. No, it's going just on this stupid scene.
It's almost like when you're told to do something, so you do exactly that without interpreting what's actually being said.
How do you feel about the battle and stuff in this? Because it's a big battle. Like normally, like the big set piece is the battle right at the end of these movies.
I mean, I think it's the most far-fetched thing in the whole thing. I mentioned earlier, but there's literally that bit where they get onto one of the jets and they go to the leader of that tribe that they meet. And he says, do you think you can fly this thing? Or something along those lines. He says, yeah, I should be able to.
What is it, Harrier?
Yeah, which is a bit of a jump in and of itself. But then to have all of the tribe be able to fly them, so there's now 12, 15 Harrier jump jets doing perfect formation, flying around and doing all of the things that it takes years for these pilots to do, is just, again, another example of no through line. Okay, well, how do they get to that point? We want them to be able to learn to fly jets. How do we get there? Rather than going, oh, well, let's put them in that machine that gives them all the knowledge.
There's no montage that could have got tribespeople to Harriers. Like there's no montage. I mean, it'd be a long bloody montage. You would take like another movie's worth of clips and small clips. And I feel like, so I guess they didn't do it. There's no way of doing it.
It's just that all the time. It's just a massive leap. It's just, I can't see how they got from point A to point B. And it's the whole thing of going, if you'd have explained it, mate, okay, I'm not asking for like, I want to see them training for 15 years to be a fighter pilot. I'm not saying that.
He was right. They could have used the brain machine.
You've already set up a system that kind of fills that gap,
knowledge. Yeah.
And you're not using that. So it's like, again, it's lazy kind of writing where you just go, well, I want them to be in jets, so that's what's going to happen.
They could have gone to the bar, which is very human-like bar, even though they're telling they're drinking weird Star Wars juice. They could have got all the tribespeople in there and shot the brain knowledge machine at a disco ball, and it could have reflected all around the room and imparted knowledge into the whole of the tribespeople.
Immediately, that is a far better scene.
Yeah.
And that, okay, yeah, it's a little bit far-fetched, but it's less far-fetched than seeing nothing. And that's the whole problem I think it has with this, is that we don't know how, for the most part, anything gets from point A to point B. And
also, do they teleport? So how they destroy the, we'll get to that bit, should we just, how they destroy the cyclos is so there's one attack, it's a 2-part attack. One attack is on the dome, and they need to blow up the dome because all through this movie there's these stupid grey Dune-like nose plugs that means that the cyclos can...
yes, it is very Dune-like, isn't it? Yeah,
and so the cyclos have to have a different atmosphere to humans. It's kind of cool idea. And they live in this big dome on Earth, which I also think is cool. So the humans decide to they need to smash the dome and blow it up. It's Jim Coates, I think, that ends up blowing it up. All the explosives
Kim Coates, Kim Coates' character Carlo, yeah.
And a lot of the explosives on this, it's quite good for the audience because obviously you need to notice things. A lot of the explosives on this movie say explosives on them, which I found quite helpful. So just in case you didn't know something was, the very TNT, like from the Wacky Racers or something.
Yes, yeah.
So everything that explodes on them. But so there's 2-prong attack. One of them is on the dome, and Kim Coates, he sort of does a sort of his final hurrah, and he blows up the thing. But that's okay, I guess. And then obviously the atmosphere is all changed. But what the other part, the second part of the 2-prong attack? How do they teleport? Random supporting character who you don't really care about that much.
Yeah, they teleport him there. And I think
with a nuclear bomb.
I believe so.
And he does his final stand there, and he blows up, and their whole planet just goes poof like the Death Star. Like it's their whole planet just blows up from this explosion because their atmosphere is so flammable. And this to me was almost like this summed up like the cyclos to me. It's like, how have they been able
to colonise Earth? How have they been able to overrun humans? Because they don't seem like they're very intelligent.
They need to sort their atmosphere out. They need to because it's like that. You can't live on a planet that explosive.
They need to start recycling. They need, they need to look after the ozone.
That was so silly, that bit, and that is poof. And they do sort of say at the end of the movie, there are other cyclo colonies, and if they come here, because that's how they end. That's how Tell ends up. John Travolta, he ends up in a prison surrounded by all the gold.
Yeah,
in a very sort of, I don't know.
And it's done in a way which clearly they were expecting to be making a sequel.
I didn't think of that.
They're clearly setting. That's why he doesn't die.
And Forrest Whitaker's still alive, isn't he?
Yeah, that's why that's there, because that's very optimistic to be thinking about a sequel when there's there was a lot of production problems. There's a lot of issues with the scripts, even prior to filming. So that was an adventurous kind of leap in and of itself.
What would you call Battlefield Earth 2? The golden years. Battlefield Earth, the golden years. I would have called it that.
That's a pretty good title.
That is good, yeah.
If they do decide to make
I won't be surprised because the amount of crap they're churning out at the moment. I could see someone doing a Battlefield Earth. There's
very few kind of new ideas. It tends to be sequels or reboots or reimaginings or whatever you want to call them. But if we just look at, we've mentioned most of the cast. We've also got Sabine Cosenti playing Chrissy, which is the kind of I mean, that's one positive about this, is that there isn't really a romance kind of subplot kind of... it's there, but it's not...
She rides away from her home village on a horse to go see him, and then she's immediately got the sort of shock collar on from like Fallout or something.
But it's not explored in the way that, again, probably because they weren't very good at the writing aspect of making the film. But it's not to the point where it's shoehorned in.
You know what I thought watching this, and now we're on to the one female character of the movie. It just triggered my memory. She is the one woman in this, and the other woman is the alien lady, cyclo lady, who is like just a bit of she's sort of a bit saucy,
a bit of eye candy.
Yeah, she's like, but not really, because she's got like the
eye
massive
candy
forehead.
for the
We haven't even said how big their heads are. Okay, but she
or their hands.
What happens to her, by the way, in that the alien lady?
I don't know. I don't think it's explored. I think
you know, like if there was any evidence for this movie being like a guy just trying to put together his dream movie, it's the fact that he kind of... I know this is a bit of a criticism of a lot of movies, but this one I think is like a great example of that. It
goes even further, because there's only 2 women in there, and one of them is just as a source of like lust and eye candy.
Yeah, and the other one's like a helpless
damsel in distress
immediately.
Element,
yeah, and
you know,
yeah, they're not interesting characters at all, to be honest.
No, they're not. And then the final sort of like main person we have is obviously Michael Breen, who I mentioned earlier, who stars in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Braveheart, Gangs of New York, Sum of All Fears. You know, pretty well-known actor. So, but obviously we've kind of spoken about this film and our thoughts on it. But if we look at how this is received by other audiences and critics, so if you look at the old Metascore scores, we've got a critic score of 9 out of 100.
Oh, I thought it was going to be 9 out of 10.
No.
Oh.
And a 1.8 out of 10 audience-wise. If we look at IMDb rating, from 83 votes, we've got 2.5 out of 10. If we look at Rotten Tomatoes, we've got a 3% tomato meter from critics and a 13% audience score.
That's about the same level of tomatoes in a in like a tomato bake jar that's got all the E numbers in. 3%.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't bode particularly well, does it? It kind of shows you how bad this film was received. You know, I think Roger Ebert, who I mentioned in Starship Troopers episode, he had some negative things to say about that. He also said about this film that not only is it on his most hated list, he called it not merely bad, it's unpleasant in a hostile way, and a film that for decades to come will be the punchline of jokes about bad movies. He dismissed claims that it was full of religious ideology, however, stating that the film contains no evidence of Scientology or any other system of thought.
I would, because when I heard about this movie, I kind of thought this was a Scientology sort of lore movie or something. But I don't think it. I haven't done enough reading into this. But to me, it just looks like John Travolta likes L. Ron Hubbard obviously a lot because of all the Scientology stuff, and he wanted to bring... It comes across to me that he just wanted to bring his book to life. Unless there's just unless, you know, when you get to like stage like 897 of Scientology like things, you know, maybe they start to say, you know, maybe this is in there hidden or something, but that's just conspiracy. I don't know. It just seems like he really likes this story or something, which is... Is there something like innocent about it? Is there something like poor John Travolta for, you know, is he, he's really brought into a bit of a corker of a story, really, because a lot of like, you know, Reddit conversations about the book from people that have read it seems to be, it does. Some people said it does a better job than the movie of some of these themes and stuff, but barely. Some people say, you know, it's a bit of the equivalent of a popcorn movie in a book. It's very rompy, very campy. I think there's a foreword at the beginning of the book that opens up saying like from L. Ron Hubbard why he wanted to write the biggest sci-fi book ever or something. So people have a bit of a problem with, like, I think he thought he made a really good sci-fi novel here. This is never really the book it's not really like it's not really held up there with some of the greater sci-fi books. Is it like, Dune or something? Although there's other ones, arguably lots better, but it's not one of those sort of sci-fi classics, I don't think. So, is this just one boy's dream that's just gone to pot?
I think for me that's kind of where the Scientology element comes into it. Because essentially, as I said, nobody's really asking for this movie to be made other than John Travolta. And I don't know how much of it is because he's a movie star and he can get things done, and how much is because he was part of Scientology and can get things done. And I think that's kind of where, for me, the kind of Scientology elements come into it, in the sense of,
go on,
how many times have you heard about a decent script idea that doesn't get made because there's no budget for it, or there's nobody, the classic one, Aliens 3, the original kind of thought process and some of the ideas going into that prior to what actually came out were amazing, but it didn't get made because people didn't think audiences would buy it. And then you get this, which there's not a lot there. It's a very... There's not a lot of lore and not a lot of world building in this, and I can't see there being too much more in the book. For this to get made is kind of where I think Scientology comes into it, because they've kind of gone, we want this made, so it's going to get made, regardless of how good it's going to be, regardless of what other people think on what, well-known, and that's potentially why I think well-known directors and well-known composers and people who aren't closely linked or recommended by John Travolta, why nobody's kind of working on it other than, some of the cast. And I sort of lightheartedly made a joke of, what's John Travolta got on Forrest Whitaker to get him to star in this movie. But that's kind of where it kind of feeds into me, because it's a case of, for the life of me, I can't see anybody working on this film thinking at the time this is going to be a good film.
Yeah,
there's so many red flags going off immediately. The character design of the cyclos.
Again, I think that could look good on a concept art.
On a concept art, yes.
Hold on, no, because of the sort of dreadlocks and the big hands, like you sort of
big hands.
Mentioned, yeah.
They're clearly walking on stilts.
They're so clumsy looking.
Exactly.
And we haven't spoke about that other cyclos as well. The one that says that thing. It's got that. They put like an echo on his.
Yeah, they do that a couple of times.
Which is a terrible thing they've done there.
With endless options for renewal.
Yeah, no, it's the whole sentence repeated.
Yeah.
For endless options of renewal. For
endless options of renewal. It's just a weird kind of thing.
Yeah.
But apparently the original plans called for a sequel, and it quite heavily alludes to that towards the end of the film. And apparently that was going to be based on the second half of the novel. So that potentially is why it feels a little bit unfinished in places and a little bit gaps aren't filled, is because it's based on the first half of that novel.
Oh, okay.
But I suppose that's no different from, say, Dune, which is part of a larger series. And, Dune Part 1 is based on the newest, the newest version of Dune is based on Part 1 is based on the first half of that book. It is a
big book, Battlefield Earth. I think it's a big one.
So that, again, benefit of the doubt there, that may explain why some of those gaps perhaps aren't filled. But obviously, coming out of the reception of this, that kind of squashed those plans quite quickly. Obviously we've mentioned quite a lot about the whole Dutch angles and Dutch tilts, and cinematographer Giles Nutchins has gone on record as saying that it wasn't his idea to use the colour filters or Dutch angles.
That's another terrible thing about this, isn't it? The colour filters.
Yeah, sometimes it's too dark, sometimes it's too green, it's too blue, it's too purple. But apparently the reason he'd done that is because he was given the smallest lighting budget.
Was it after Matrix, this?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Because the slow-mo... I've heard that already, actually, because the slow-mo is probably...
probably heavily influenced. I think by
when you slow mo something down, it's not filmed correctly in like slow motion cam or something. The footage is worse. So this movie, they obviously chose to slow mo it after they'd filmed it, so that's why the slow motion scenes look worse. But I've heard that on a review of this movie. But what I hadn't heard on this movie is actually, like, you're right, the green filter, that's a Matrix thing, I happen to know.
Yeah.
The green filter, so they've just sort of ripped the Matrix a bit, I reckon.
As
I
say,
things there.
He said it's because he had a small lighting budget to work with, so it's trying to do the best with the budget that you've got. Interestingly, John Travolta initially offered the director's seat to Quentin Tarantino, who declined.
Was it not Ridley Scott or something at one point?
I'm not surprised. He probably offered it to a lot of well-known directors. And, nothing against Roger Christian, but there's a reason why Roger Christian is the director here. Do you know what I mean? That's one of the red flags where you go, okay, well...
Big sci-fi
You've
movie.
got 70-odd million. You've got a big star. Why is there not a director of some sort of clout coming in? Maybe not a Ridley Scott or a Tarantino, who are quite big, but certainly, let's say like a Joel Schumacher, for example, or, somebody who's it's quite... That's a bit of an indication, potentially, as to why, or some of the things that perhaps are going on. So the name of Roger Christian was actually recommended by George Lucas, obviously having worked on him on the Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace and also from A New Hope. So that's kind of where his name got thrown into the mix. But as I say, John Travolta was pretty much the driving force behind this, and even his theatrical agent William Morris, was said to be unenthusiastic about the film, which reportedly led to Travolta threatening to leave them if they did not help him set up the film. So he's very much throwing his toys out of the pram there. And,
wow.
If you're an agent and you've got a big star like John Travolta, probably want to keep him, so you probably are going to, be a bit of a yes man there. But as you mentioned earlier, John Travolta wanted to be the main character, didn't he? He was going to play Johnny Goodboy, the young hero, but by the time they got investment and backing for the project, he'd obviously aged out of the role and decided to play the villainous part Turl. And boy, did he play that part.
How I remember it, most of my memories thinking about this movie, my memories from the other night of watching it, is, a lot of it is just him in that sort of that rubbish control room with the low ceiling, and then there's that way they send, he has that back room which is all cold looking, and they send messages through that. But that's how I'm going to remember this movie, is Forrest Whitaker and John Travolta, because I guess those scenes are like the most... They
kind of reek of like lack of budget. We've run out of budget. Let's put you in one location and have you talk. There's not really much else going on there. And that may have been the case at that point. Films are often not shot in order. So, but you mentioned earlier about J.D. Shapiro, and apparently his adaptation of the original book was much looser, and his screenplay was a lot darker, grittier.
Oh, that's not the one. The one I got is Corey Mandel, the screenwriter.
Oh, apologies.
Is it another one as well?
Yeah, so J.D. Shapiro, his screenplay was a lot darker and grittier, and apparently had a much more compelling story with rich characters. Both MGM president Mike Marcus and John Travolta loved it, and the project was officially greenlit with a $100 million budget. However, following pressure from Travolta's people, the studio later wanted a more faithful version than Shapiro had written, according to insiders. So Battlefield Earth was the book that Hubbard most wanted to see adapted as a movie, and he had left detailed notes before his death on how that movie should be made.
Whoa, they were serving someone who wasn't on the planet anymore.
Exactly.
That reeks of occulty religion, to be honest.
And that pretty much probably explains exactly why this film is the way it is.
Because they were doing it off the notes of someone passed away.
And that's what I mean. If John Travolta is very much a part of that religion, and you've got people who have vested interests in going, no, this is how it should be made, this is what he wanted it to be made like, you're a part of our religion. And there is that, that kind of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. When it comes to Scientology, you hear a lot of rumours and stories and innuendos in these things. I think there's probably a big element of John Travolta, making this film, and I wonder how much of it was pressure from the Scientology community saying, you want to be... Because I think at that point, I don't know if there's obviously been certain points where he was very much part of Scientology, and then there was points where I think he criticised it somehow, and he's kind of flip-flopped. And I don't know if this is almost a thing of like, you want to be welcomed back into the fold, this is what you need to do. That kind of, that rhetoric there. So that, again, probably explains a lot of that. And, you just look at some of the films that came out of this, in terms of like winning. So this film won a lot of Razzies, which for anybody who doesn't know is the Oscars for the bad movies. So Until I Know Who Killed Me exceeded their record by winning 8 Razzies in 2008. So up until 2008, this was the film with the highest amount of Razzies, and was tied with Showgirls, which we happened to mention earlier, which was a Paul Verhoeven film. So it's 7 Razzie nominations and wins. So the film won in every single category it was nominated at the 2001 awards. So Forrest Whitaker was the only nominee to escape without a Razzie. For Worst Supporting Actor, Barry Pepper won. This film went on to win special Razzies for Worst Drama of Our First 25 Years in 2005, and Worst Picture of the Decade in 2010. So it's winning awards, but maybe not the awards that it wants to win.
Yeah.
Nobody is, well, apart from Sandra Bullock, who kind of embraced winning her Razzies for, I think, Miss Congeniality or something.
Halle Berry as well for Catwoman. I think
she embraced
cool
that.
I don't know if John Travolta did for this. Did he embrace his? Didn't he go and
he may have
turn
done.
up for his
He
one?
may have done.
Might be wrong.
So the Investor Entertainment sued producer Franchise Pictures for fraud. Franchise claimed that the budget was $75 million instead of the actual budget of $44 million. Franchise was ordered by the court to pay Entertainment $121.7 million in damages and went bankrupt. Entertainment only financed the film because it came as part of a package deal with The Art of War and the whole 9 yards. So this film has bankrupted a production company. So again, another nail in the coffin for this film. In some of the promotional aspects, star John Travolta made the usual publicity rounds, but instead of discussing the film in interviews, he signed copies of L. Ron Hubbard's book, which was seen as an attempt to attract new members to Scientology. So again, there's some questionable marketing practices here. Yeah. So it just feels like it feels very much like a bit of a shady kind of production here. It doesn't feel like there was good intentions, really. So the film had a toy line as well, by a company called Trend Masters, and it was their last. So
really?
It basically bankrupted a toy company as well.
Wow.
Tom Cruise was said to have warned Warner Brothers that he thought the movie was a bad idea. This was later denied by his spokesperson, but it wouldn't surprise me if he said that.
I think this is a bad idea, guys.
Yeah. And after the release of the film, obviously Franchise Pictures was in deep trouble. Their package of films were Get Carter, The Art of War, 3,000 Miles to Graceland, Angel Eyes, High City by the Sea, and Spartan were box office failures. The only films to have any success was The Whole Nine Yards and The Boondock Saints, whose real success came only after being released on home video. So, up and down the production, it's bankrupted companies, it's caused companies to fold. So, it's not even a case of you could argue that it was successful for the company, but it wasn't well received. We know it didn't make a lot of money. It's then gone on to cause companies to sue other companies.
I think it's that, that Uncle Ben... Is it Uncle Ben from Spider-Man?
Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility.
responsibility.
Like putting something out, if you throw... This reminds me of what Robbie Williams said about that song he did called Rude Box, which actually has a whole deep lore to it itself. It's actually a cover, and the original version of the song is actually good, by the way. Do you know that song? Rude Box. The Rude Box. But he said...
Vaguely.
He said normally what happens if you throw shit at the wall, no one really cares. People ignore it. But he said when he made Rude Box, he threw shit at the wall, and everyone was like, "Oh, there's some shit on the wall," and everyone was like, "Oh, you're so... Why'd you do that, Robbie?" And it's that thing with this movie. It's like there's a lot of crap movies, but it feels like with this one, everyone turned around and was like, "Hold on a minute,
that is a crap movie."
That's so bad." Yeah,
it's something that a lot of people can kind of unify themselves on.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us on quite nicely to further watching. Okay. So what are some of the things that you were thinking would be good? Not necessarily if you like this film, because I don't think anybody will.
I think if you like this film, this is me being into Star Wars and stuff, but if you like this movie, then you probably like all the most recent Star Wars sequels. If you don't like this movie, then if you think this movie is a bit silly, and if you enjoyed some of the silly elements, it's a bit. I'd probably to watch Starship Troopers. If you like some of the, if you like the whole sort of the brainwashing type scene, or the knowledge scene, where they shoot the thing in his head, that's just to me, that's just very Flash Gordon-y. I've mentioned that already, though. I think, movies from around the sort of time... I don't know when the Stargate movie came out, but that's kind of
That was sort of early 90s.
That kind of feels like it's in the same kind of world, sort of, as this could be. I feel like the ones that do it really good is, Fifth Element and stuff, but they're kind of obvious.
It's a good shout.
But it's a weird one, isn't it? Because this movie is quite... It reminds me of Stargate the series, or Farscape, or that one with the Hercules actor. Have you seen that one? Is it Andromeda?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Andromeda.
It reminds me more of that kind of thing. To be honest, it's a weird one, but I mean, the sort of threat of the aliens they're just... I can't really think of a film where they've done aliens as bad as this, to be honest.
They never really feel like a threat, do they?
No, if you think of Independence Day or something, where there's a massive ship above the above the planet or whatever, and all those films where they I don't know really. I think I don't know.
I think for me, some of the things I pointed out. So we mentioned it last time, but Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat.
Yeah,
I think is a great film, and it has similar elements about this. Obviously, I think that's done much, much better. District 9 was a film that I think we mentioned in the last episode. Similar kind of, in some ways, similar. Again, does it a lot better. Pitch Black, or The Chronicles of Riddick.
I like those, yeah.
Again, I think there's a lot to like there. I think, as I say, although this film is generally obviously a bad film, I think it's in a genre where if you were disappointed with this and you wanted something that was going to be what you thought it wanted to be,
I think, the old Dune, because this feels much more like the Lynch Dune. It feels more like that one, mainly because of the sort of the nose, the breathing apparatus and stuff. But it feels more like that, and I would say that's pretty good, really. And compared to this, and you know, like what you said earlier as well about Planet of the Apes. I think this movie, the aliens, have more similarity to the apes and the humans in. You know, the difference is slightly sort of kind of minimal, really, between the apes and the humans in Planet of the Apes. And I feel like that's what's weird here. They don't really feel like aliens.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really feel like they come from that planet. When that planet exploded in this, you didn't care, really.
No.
When they exploded the whole cyclos.
I think one other film that I picked out as well, and mainly because of how some of it looks, reminded me a little bit of a poor man's Dark City.
Oh, okay.
Which is a 90s film with Kiefer Sutherland, Rufus Sewell, and that's a very, very different film, but I think that creates a very kind of dark world in a good way, like visually dark. And
there's those other ones like Existenz.
David Cronenberg.
You know, that feels like a dark, sort of weird, dark world, but like you say, done quite well.
Yeah.
Closing
thoughts. Closing thoughts. What is the main takeaway you would say?
I think that I would watch it again. I think that I wonder how many years have to go by. You know, this film won't necessarily fade away. It's like it will be it's probably iconic in its own way, really, in all the wrong ways. And I don't know, probably what that Corey Mandel said. You know, if you give in to your, you know, if you give in to money and establishment, you know, you might end up making a Battlefield Earth. I think you can put that into your own life in a way of just like, you know, don't sell out, man.
Yeah.
You'll end up making this. And I really think this is a sign of things to come when these people make movies with the wrong agenda, I think, really.
That kind of hits nicely onto what I think my takeaway is I feel like this film was made for reasons other than to make a good movie.
Yeah.
It was made for an agenda. And whether or not it has any of that kind of, as Roger Ebert said, whether or not it has those ideologies in the film is kind of irrelevant. This film was made really to kind of, you know, push forward a movement, I feel. And I think if they'd have focused on creating a good film, I think maybe it wouldn't necessarily be a great film or even a good film, but it may not be as bad. So I think that's kind of my takeaway is if they'd have tried to make an enjoyable film, I think they would have achieved that.
Hi, I'm Barry Wood, CEO, President and Visionary of Barry Wood's International Agency to the Stars. We are looking for the next Michael Kitchen or Felicity Kendall, and that could be you. Simply send a fax to 0224 stars, and before you know it, you could have the agent that puts the Raz into razzmatazz. I've worked with some of the finest performers in the country, from John Nettles to Jimmy Nail, Patsy Palmer to Beverly Callard. The list goes on. Soon that could be you, only with Barry Wood's International Agency to the Stars, where Hollywood meets Harrogate. I said to Nick Berry, stick with me, son, you'll be bigger than Peter Egan, and I defy anybody to tell me I'm wrong.
Unfortunately, it's come to that time in the episode where we have to say goodbye. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts from, and if you're feeling extra generous, why not tell a few friends? Also, head over to our social media platforms so you can stay up to date. So for today's episode, you've been listening to Ryan Etherington, Jimmy Murphy and Simon Keet, and together we have been Bury Our Bones with Cinema. Be a one-button job. Boom, 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 boom.
I have a terrible tendency to just scroll about and when we're doing it, I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You listen to it back.
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?